Hello, everybody. This is Jono Bacon, and I'm back again for another one of these. I guess you could say it's a video guide, if you will, for my friends at the Open Organization. So, the Open Org do great work in encouraging open methodologies and practices in business. And I've been doing these, well, I've done one so far, but I've been doing these videos, which is where I share some approaches and some methodologies that I found useful in my work. For those of you unfamiliar with what I do, I'm a consultant, and I work with companies for how to build community strategy, either around a public product or a service or a platform, or how you can build communities inside of a company, such as with inner source and digital transformation. Anyway, enough of that. So today I want to talk about how you plan work effectively in a company. Now, this is something that I think is a bit of an elephant in a room for a lot of companies, which is, you've got all of these ideas and visions about what you want to do in your product and your service, whatever, but how do you actually convert that into real stuff that people can work on? And I want to talk through some things that I've learned from working with my clients around this, both small startup companies as well as much larger kind of multinational enterprises. Now, I think fundamentally there are two layers of how we should think about this. There is an executive layer, which is, the higher order business goals. Like, these are the things that we want to see. These are the things that our customers need. These are the things that our communities need. And at that layer, fundamentally, that group of people want to make sure that those requirements are actually getting delivered effectively and efficiently within the current set of resources, right? So you want to make sure that that layer is happy. But then, of course, you've got the departmental layer, which are the groups of people, the buckets of people who have actually got to deliver that work. And that's very much focused on delivery. Like, how do we take this requirement and break that down into a set of pieces that individuals know how to deliver in different ways? So I think if we're designing how to effectively manage projects, you have to think about serving those two layers well. And in many, many cases, what I've seen, project management approaches that serve one of them very well and the other one less well. So the way I tend to think of it is that we have a couple of key goals here. The first thing is that we really need to understand, like, what are the requirements that should be delivered? Like, what are the actual things that we need to focus on? One of the big problems in startups, particularly, is that you'll put together a plan and you'll start working on it, and then the founder or another member of the company will say, oh, now we need to do this, or a new customer showed up, we need to do this. Now, companies are malleable organizations, so you're always going to have a certain amount of this, but it's also important that we stay focused as best we can. So understanding those requirements as best as you can to limit that kind of shift is, I think, the first thing. The second thing as well is putting together a plan where you set expectations very clearly around not just what's going to be delivered, but also when it's going to be delivered. And doing it in a level of detail that doesn't completely bog people down in the minutiae. Okay? So that's how I tend to think of the overall goals of this. Now, to do this well, I think you need to think about what are the things that frustrate people in the workplace and what are the things that make people happy. Because one of the things I can't stand about people who kind of do this for a living, people who are on the strategic side and the project management side. And I spend a lot of time in my career focusing on strategy. In fact, that's the majority of what I tend to do with my clients. So I'm probably guilty of this myself. But a lot of people who focus on this think about building the most perfect process, but they don't think about whether it's actually going to map to the reality of how people tend to work, okay? You can build something that looks fantastic on paper, but it doesn't make any sense in the real world, or it's just annoying in the real world. This is one of the problems with most companies that I've seen who produce apps for managing to-do lists, is that most people don't like making lists of stuff that they have to get through. It's just annoying. They've got enough kind of constriction in the world that they want to reduce that. So we need to think about the reality of that. Now, I believe that people really don't like to be boxed in. I think that most people don't want to just work in a cube. Most people don't want to be just given a list of tasks that they have to go through and that's it. I think people enjoy autonomy and choice and the flexibility to work on things that are interesting to them. Now, of course, we're talking about business here. You've got to, people have got to have a list of stuff they've got to get through. You can't just show up to work and do whatever you want. That's not realistic. But I think that people are often reluctant to just maintain and crunch through lists, and also people just don't like having a punch card, like having to punch in and track at a minute level all the things that they're working on. I think it's largely unnecessary. The other thing that people don't generally like is ambiguity and not being involved in the decision making. That, those people get to make all the decisions and then you've got to go and do the work is a common criticism that I often hear. So the more we can incorporate people into that, the better. And then also you can often get with a lot of people, particularly on the delivery side, is just decision paralysis on like what you're supposed to work on. But this is a real problem in startups where, everybody's kind of got to dig, roll their sleeves up and dig in a variety of different places. And sometimes you can show up to work and think, oh, well, I've got to do this, but then I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. Where do I start? Now, the inverse of what people don't like are the things that people do like. And I think, first of all, people like shipping, like actually delivering work and being rewarded for it in different ways. I think in particular that they like being rewarded for it in an intrinsic way where, they're respected by their peers, they get a nice note from their management, those kinds of things. Not necessarily, swag and stickers and t-shirts and all that kind of stuff. I think people also want clarity and simplicity of focus. I think that all that complexity that bubbles around people in businesses, the more you can simplify that so someone can say, you know what, all I need to think about are these things and I can get on with those, is going to make people just much happier in the way that they operate. And then also, I think people really like to know that when they work on something, that it's got the approval, it's got the sign-off from leadership. I think a lot of people are nervous that the work that they do either isn't approved by leadership, so therefore they're worried that there's going to be a complaint further down the line. Or what happens is the project that you're working on gets cancelled and then there's no meaning to the work. It doesn't see the light of day, and that's really demotivating. People have to do work that's got meaning. So to me, as you think about how you plan and manage projects, you've got to take into account those good things and bad things that are in the workplace. So I want to share the approach that I like to use here. As I say on all of these videos, there is no one way to do this. This is just a way that I found to be effective. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm just going to give you the high-level overview of how this tends to work. So the first thing is we need to gather requirements. This is critically important. Now, what I mean by this is go and talk to your CEO, your CTO, your CIO, like talk to the leadership in the company and sit down with them and say, what do you want to see in a fixed time period? Now, this is really important, okay? Now, the time period that I like is 6 months. It might be a year. But you say, what do you think are the most important things we need to focus on in my department in the next 6 months or a year, okay? And get a list and ask them to be concrete. Don't, if someone says, improve the website. So, well, let's get more specific. What specifically about the website do you think needs improving? What do you think we should focus on there? And what you want to get here is a Christmas list of things from all the leadership in the company about what they should see. Now also go through that and ask, notable members of the company, such as like key engineers, or go and ask members of the community, talk to some customers around this. Like get a holistic list of all this stuff and then start prioritizing it. You'll see a lot of commonality where a lot of people will ask for the same things. Now, the reason why this is really important is, first of all, it gives you a much better sense of what you should actually be focused on. Because fundamentally, my view is that when you work for a company, you should be in service of the company's mission. Like if you do that well, then you're going to have a long and happy career at that company. But the other reason is that when we convert some of those things into actual projects, you've already garnered some existing trust because you've demonstrated that you've been through, you've listened to everybody, listening is such a powerful component of leadership. And what you've done is you've converted that into a plan. And generally people will think, you know what, my thing wasn't in that plan, but I trust the fact that this plan is representative of what people think. Or if my thing is in the plan, I'm really happy that I was listened to, that I was part of that process. So it gets rid of that issue about people not being involved in decision making. So go through that. Now you're going to end up with a huge list of stuff, and there'll be way more stuff in there than you can actually deal with. So what you then need to do is go through a prioritization process and narrow that down to what you can reasonably deliver in that time period. And you don't necessarily have to do full things. Like one requirement could be build an entire website. You don't necessarily have to build the whole website. You could start with something like a small piece of that, so you can start shipping and delivering on some pieces, but not all of those pieces involved in that one project. So that's step one. The second step is to then create a higher level delivery schedule. And what I mean by this is for that set period of time, let's say 6 months or a year, you say, these are the things that we're going to deliver, and these are the broad time frames that we're going to deliver it in. This doesn't have to be down to the specific date, okay? This is supposed to be high level. Now, that time frame may be H1 or H2, like which half of the year. It could be quarters that you target it to. It could be months. But just, you basically say, these are the things we're going to work on, and these are the month, the quarter, the half of the year that it's going to be delivered. I'm personally a fan of breaking it down to quarters, because I think it's not as granular as a month, and it's not as general as a H1 or H2. I only learned this H1 and H2 quite recently. I'm not sure how many people use that. So if you're as confused as I am, let me know in the comments. Anyway, so what you do is you basically say for each of those things, like, this is that time period, this is the thing we're going to work on. And then importantly, you don't add anything to that list unless it's got a clear set of deliverables. Now, this is something that human beings wrestle with, is specifying things in a measurable way. So again, a deliverable is not improve the website. A deliverable is add these pages to the website. A deliverable is not optimize the application. It is drive a 10% performance gain in CPU usage. You know, it's got to be measurable. Okay, there's all kinds of material on the internet about smart objectives and stuff like that. That's the focus. So for each of those items, you know, when you list an item in this high level plan that you're going to work on in that time period, and you say when it's going to be delivered, then you should make sure that it's got that set of deliverables there. And it shouldn't be, I'll try and deliver these. It's like, no, if we don't deliver those things by the end of that time period, then questions are going to be asked, okay? So you've got to think carefully about how much you can actually deliver and what you can do in that time period. Now, big projects, you may have, for example, a website. You may have to break that into 3 phases. The first phase is creating a specification about what you're going to do, and a UX. Second phase may be some engineering, and the third phase may be kind of like, you know, deployment and release. Break that into 3 pieces. Don't just say deliver website at the end of the year. Break it into those 3 pieces and those deliverables for each of them. What you don't want to do is get down to such a granular level of detail that, you know, where you're talking about individual tasks. You know, each project may have 50 or 60 tasks attached to it. You don't want to get down to that level of detail in this high level plan. The reason for this is that you're going to use this plan to appraise people on what the plan is for this time period. And you're also going to use it as a living document where you'll reflect status. And what I mean by that is another column you should have in this, I tend to do this in a spreadsheet, but another column you should have here is going to be around status. Now, you'll have different types here, like it's not started, it's in progress, it's being reviewed, or it's blocked, you know, there's something holding it up, it's being postponed, or it's complete, okay? And what you'll do is on a weekly basis, you'll make sure that that status column is current. Because what this is going to do is this is going to provide a place. You gather all those requirements, you put all of this plan in one single place, and at any time anyone wants to see what's going on and where the current status of things are, they can go and look at that document. That's the point. Like, I'm a big fan of doing this in a Google spreadsheet as an example, because it's easy for people to go and look at. Well, you know, unless you're in China, for example. Google is a little bit more complicated in China, but in the rest of the world, it's a little bit easier. Now, the other thing that you want to put in for each of those items as well is who is the owner. So the owner is not necessarily who is responsible for doing all the work. It's who is responsible for the project getting done. Okay, so the owner may be just maybe a manager, but you also want to mark who's involved, like who are the people who are going to be actually doing the work, and then finally, who needs to get notified when it's completed. So for example, an owner may be me, there may be 3 other people, Sarah, Jane, and Jim, who may be actually doing the work. But then, you know, Erica, maybe my boss, it's my wife, she is my boss, maybe notify them when the work is done. So when I complete the project, I can go to Erica and say, it's done, you know, here's the details. But I might need to notify somebody else. So what you do by doing this is you create a very clear high level. You don't bog it down with individual work items. You don't bog it down to specific dates. You just say, these are the things we're going to do. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, what about that detail? What about the specific dates? What about all the specific items? I think, honestly, that's up to you as a leader to be able to figure out. The general view that I have here is there is a tendency for people to want to track that granularity of information around projects, all that kind of detail, like that every single item needs to be tracked, that needs to be done. So you can say, here's that when we do these 60 things, we'll complete this project. I think people can't stand that. I think people just want to be given the trust and the support to execute on a set of deliverables. So instead of tracking the 50 things that you need to do to deliver a website, I think people just need to know we need to deliver the website under this criteria. So I'm generally of the view, like, if you have a good team, like, trust them to be able to do that themselves. Trust them to be able to manage their own workload. If people struggle with that, give them some guidance, give them some approaches and tools that they can use, but don't micromanage people, because people don't like that. It's annoying. So anyway, that's how I tend to think about how you track the plan. And then again, make that a living document, a document that your CEO or somebody else can just go and look at any time. So, if a CEO wakes up at 3:00 in the morning stressing about something, thinking, oh, what's the current status of Jono's project? I can't remember. Oh, hang on, he's got that spreadsheet. Goes and has a look. Everything's looking green. Brilliant. Don't have to worry as much. If everything's looking red, time for a conversation. The other thing that I would recommend as well is that you then on periodic times send a summary update of progress to the stakeholders. So when you say, these are the 15 things we're going to work on in this time period based upon your requirements gathering, you will periodically, once a month, let's say, send an email to all of those stakeholders and just say, here's a set of bullet points, giving an update on where these projects stand. And I found this to be a really lightweight, thin, effective approach to how you manage this kind of work and how you do it in a fairly transparent and open way. God, this was long, wasn't it? I'm not good at doing short videos. I've realized that, I think to myself, this will take 6 minutes. I'll be able to get through this. I've got a list of notes, so that's why you can keep seeing me looking at my computer over here. And it's not quick. I can't be concise. It's a failing. So thank you everybody for hanging in there for 17 minutes or whatever this is going to end up being, 18 minutes. There's going to be more of these videos. Thank you to my friends at the Open Org for the great work that they do and for showcasing my videos here. I hope this is useful. Please feel free to go and share your thoughts in the comments. Feel free to get in touch with me if you want. Jono@jonobacon.com is my email address. And that's it, really. Peace out.